And here we are. I'm Erin Patterson. Hi, everybody. I'm here interviewing Becca Cox. Becca is the director of the Hope Counseling Center. Say hi, Becca.
Everyone.
So excited to have her here. So Becca is a therapist, and she is going to help us with a topic that many of us have come up against before and will again in the future, but it's an important one right now, and that is the issue of mental health and how that affects group life and community life in the church. And she's going to hopefully give us some helpful tips and guidance as to how we care for people in our groups who are struggling, particularly with anxiety and depression. So here we go. I have some questions for you.
All right.
Just first of all, kind of right where we started, as group leaders, we are very likely to encounter people suffering from depression and anxiety in our groups, if it's not ourselves, but we will come back to that in a few minutes. But what are the signs? What are some of the signs that someone is struggling in this area that we might want to be aware of just as people who are in their lives, in their home group? What do we look for?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. So some of the kind of tell signs that are typically toward the beginning is that people will either stop showing up to things they used to show up to regularly, or no longer express an interest, or they will openly express a lack of interest in things that they used to be interested in, or things that used to make them happy. That will no longer be the case. So there's kind of more of just either a leveling out of emotions, or you can see if they used to be kind of presenting as happy, they might present more solemn, they may present a little more sad, they might just look or express kind of more of an emotional rawness than you typically saw in them before. They might say that they are not sleeping well, or that they're sleeping all the time, so there's a change in their sleep patterns. There can be an increase in forgetfulness, or kind of a scatterbrainedness that can sometimes come either from the depression itself, or the anxiety, or the lack of sleep. That can all be tied into it. I would also say maybe looking for increased irritability. That sometimes is a tell of both anxiety and depression, is just a decrease in bandwidth. So that irritability really increasing can be a huge indicator that something emotionally isn't quite where it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Boy, a lot of us are feeling many of those symptoms right now after the year that we've had. Again, more on that later. But what would you say if there's somebody in our home group, either that we know that they have struggled with anxiety and depression in the past, or maybe it's something new related to the stresses of this year, but they haven't said anything about it. They haven't voluntarily shared that. What do you think? What are some questions we might be able to ask how they're doing, and or what's going on? I think you might be struggling. How do you say that?
Yeah, I think just asking anything, period, is going to be really helpful. Just checking in and letting them know that not only you care about them, but that you noticed kind of a difference or a change in their habits. So saying things like, hey, I've noticed that you haven't been showing up to group as much anymore. Is there anything going on? Or you've been a lot more quiet during group discussions. Is there anything different, or anything that you've been thinking about lately that you want to share? Or, just touching base with them outside of the group situation and setting can be a great way to kind of get a feel for how they're doing and what you might want to ask them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I guess coming from that, I know that most of us who are leading home groups aren't trained as therapists, and it's not our job to diagnose people or try to treat their mental illness. But if they've identified that they are struggling with anxiety or depression or something else like that, what are some of the things that we can do from the place that we stand as people who are in their lives as home group leaders? What can we do?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Um, I would say it kind of goes with the last question you asked. Just asking them and checking in, it makes such a difference to someone who's struggling. I think we've all been there. And to just have someone recognize that, hey, it seems like things are different or tough for you right now, and to ask how you're doing can alleviate so much of the negative feelings that we might be experiencing, that alone. Additionally, I mean, different things to do is invite them to go on a walk with you. Walk, as I like to say. I'm a huge fan of movement. I think that's so important to just, whether you're struggling with anxiety or depression, can help with all of those negative symptoms you're experiencing. So a walk also gets you outside, so getting some sunlight. So maybe they're not able to walk or they're not inclined to go on a walk, or you're not. Meeting outside somewhere so they can get some vitamin D and sunlight. Again, sunlight and movement. Those are two huge things that can help with anxiety and depression and a host of other mental illnesses and just issues. So I really encourage any meet at the beach, meet, at a park, go for a walk, something like that's really going to be helpful just for their general well-being, and probably something they're not doing or making time for if they're struggling. So you encouraging that and inviting them to do that could be a game changer in kind of starting a new healthy habit with them during this stressful time. Additionally, there's a lot of people who like to not only just kind of show up and listen, which is so important, they want to do something. They want something tangible to help people. And I think that goes back to something like as simple as offering to babysit. I know COVID makes that a little complicated. So obviously someone that's either in your pod or that you feel comfortable with, or offering to drop a meal by, because that can help relieve some of the stress of trying to figure out what's for dinner, which I know we all experience at some point or another. Another great thing that a friend did for me, because I had a baby earlier this year, is she would just drop by flowers and coffee. And who doesn't want some fresh flowers or coffee on occasion, and just knowing that someone's thinking of you. So those are very tangible things that can be done. Also encouraging someone to journal or write down their thoughts. So if they don't want to talk to you about them, but just like, how's your daily devotional going? Or I just found this great daily devotional, and start talking about how that's been really beneficial for you maybe. And then throwing in like, hey, what are you doing? Are you looking for something? Do you have something that's working for you? How's your prayer life going? Some of those questions that I imagine the leaders are already asking, but just to, again, encourage those healthy habits, like getting outside, walking, spending time with the Lord. No matter what you're struggling with, those are three great things to really help people just live a healthier life.
Absolutely. And I think in a minute, I want to ask you about kind of encouraging people to seek medical and professional help, and I think that's a big one too, and we can talk about that. But before we talk about that, I just want to also encourage home group leaders. You don't have to do all those things yourself. I think as a church family, when there's somebody who's really hurting, it's good when a number of us can circle around. And so if there's a person in your home group who's struggling deeply, it'd be really good to, I think, encourage everyone else in the home group, like, hey, who could drop off coffee, who could take a walk, who could send a text once a week with a scripture verse or an encouragement, and see if you can encourage everyone to use their gifts in that way to help, so that it's not just the leader's job to do all the helping.
Yes, no, I love that. I think that's so important to remember, because as leaders, you don't want to burn out yourself. And it's a blessing to other people to be able to bless other people. And it might help them with any anxiety or depression they're personally dealing with, to be able to reach out to others. So it could be doing them a service as well.
No, that's a great point. Um, what advice would you give us as a church family, and as smaller communities of believers, when there is a significant mental health challenge? A person is in such a dark place that that the it kind of overwhelms the group time.
Mm.
And that's kind of ongoing and not just a one-time crisis, but if somebody is struggling mentally to the degree that it's hard for the group to function well, do you have any advice for that?
Oh, yeah. I think that's kind of the age-old question, right? And it's getting exacerbated by just kind of all of the oddities of this year. I think is bringing a lot more of that out in people often. So I think one really important thing to remember is that the leaders of the group are the ones that set the healthy boundaries. They are the ones that need to create the culture of the group. So saying, hey, like that's a great point, reflecting back to the person who might be going on a monologue and kind of interrupting them is actually a really healthy thing to do, because they might be doing that in other social instances and might drive people away. So lovingly saying like, that is a great point, letting them know that they're heard, and then it's a yes and pivot is what I call it. And so then you want to pivot and then be like, hey, Aaron. So you want to be really specific and take the question to someone else in the group so that it's someone else's turn. So it's very clear, like, we heard you, this is so great, and now it's someone else's turn, is a really good, healthy thing to do to create in your group culture, because there's a lot of other people in the group. And so you need to also think of it as a service to the other members in the group, because everyone has to sit there politely, and you as the leader are kind of in this unique position to be able to put up that healthy boundary. And you can do that even, other times, like you probably would be like, okay, this person's talking, and then there might be a lull. And then you say, hey, Aaron, what do you think? So it's not only when you're saying, okay, we need to not have this person talk anymore. But it is really good and healthy for them to have to do that, with sometimes the offer of following up later. Like, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It sounds like that's something you're really struggling with, or I would love to talk to you more about that later. So let's meet up after group and find a time, or let's chat a little bit after group tonight based on what your availability is. So not only are we hearing you, and we think what you're saying is important, it's important enough that I want to follow up with you later. So you might not get time now in group, but you will get time, and you're not just going to be left hanging. I think is so important for that care that you want to show group members.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good word. I think for some people it might feel like you're being rude to kind of corral somebody, but I think it's a good affirmation that it's healthy for everybody.
Absolutely.
So in terms of help and resources, we talked about some of the things that are helpful for supporting people as their friends, as their group leaders, as other people in their group. How do we support someone who's really hurting emotionally? But in terms of professional help, I think it's important and good as people who are in a position of leadership in the church. I think it's healthy and good for us to recommend professional help as well in certain cases. And there can be some hesitation in some church circles about that, but I think it's important to recognize that there are often medical things at play, and things that really require more of a professional's help that we aren't always equipped to provide. So, what would you suggest? What kinds of help and resources are there that we could point people towards?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I think a lot of times when people ask me that question, one of the first things that I recommend doing is checking with your insurance company directly to see if they cover mental health services, anything like that, or someone mentioned to me to talk to the HR department of your employer, because the HR department may have an employee assistance program or EAP program. Um, and that might also provide mental health services. So that's a great place to start to see kind of financially what the support system might be for someone who's looking. And usually they also have a list of either pre-approved therapists or psychologists that are in the area, and then maybe something that they specialize in or things that they're trained in, so that they can really help point you toward people who might be a good fit for what that person needs. I know that Santa Barbara Community Church has a list of therapists, and they have a breakdown of kind of what those therapists specialize in, what ages they work with, things like that. So that's always a great resource to tap into, is to call the office. Additionally, the pastoral staff is there and available. And I know that that's something, Erin, that you expressed to me previously, that you guys, that's part of your job. That's what you're passionate about, is helping people and being there for them, and really making sure you're available.
Yeah, and I should say that the pastoral staff, we are not licensed therapists, so there is a level of care that we are not able to provide, and that's what we would refer you to somebody on our lists of therapists for. But when it comes to spending time with people, praying with people, listening, that is what we do, and you are more than welcome to refer people, like, hey, why don't you give someone on staff at church a call? um, that's what we're here for. So there's
And
also,
so I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was going to say, could you tell us about Hope?
Yes. So there's sometimes a more immediate need, and you recognize that. And so telling someone to call their insurance or look into their HR program isn't going to be quick enough. So really quickly, just also wanted to mention, if they're a college student, I know like Westmont and UCSB both have short-term support of mental health care professionals available, from psychiatry to counseling, things like that, to at least give that immediate support. So know that they can be directed to those. I think it's usually just like part of the health clinic at both schools. I'm blanking right now, but telling them to get in touch with that department of their school can be a great way to immediately get them help. In addition to a Hope Counseling Center, we have a bunch of therapists. There's 5 of us on staff, and we all have different things that we specialize in. And you can call the one number and then get connected to a whole host of therapists. So depending on what your client need, or not client, your group member needs, sorry, that can, there be something that will be like, oh yeah, hey, this is a great therapist for you on our staff. Or we also are connected with other therapists in the community and can recommend those therapists to you as well. And something unique about Hope Counseling Center is that we have what we call the Fund for Therapy, which can help scholarship up to 10 to 15 sessions per client. And so that can make it really financially affordable, especially if your healthcare doesn't cover any of the cost, or like, it's really common for students that are like, okay, well, I have this insurance and it doesn't cover healthcare. Well, we can work with that. So that's something that we are intentional about, and that we want people to come to us, and we don't want financial means to get in the way of people receiving the help that they need.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to have home group leaders hear about this. um, let's see, you mentioned when we were chatting before, you also mentioned a suicide hotline. I think it's important just to mention that too. This is something to have in the back of your mind. Hopefully you won't ever need to know it, but
So the nice thing about the hotlines, and you can just do a Google search. If you Google like suicide help or depression help or anything like that in a pinch, there will be a whole host of things that come up for you. It's really easy to remember the national hotline number. It's 1-800-SUICIDE, and that's a 24/7 hotline. So it can be at 2 a.m., it can be at 2 p.m. There will be someone there ready to take a call. And so that's great, because that can take some of the pressure off you as a leader, that you are not the only person that they have to call. They can call that number. So if there's someone that's calling you at 3 a.m., you do not have to answer it, and you do not have to feel guilty about not answering it, because there are 24/7 hotlines that can do that support for them, in addition to texting hotlines now, because that's where we're at this day and age, and online chat rooms that are support groups for people that are struggling with that, because nighttime can be the hardest time for a lot of people struggling with depression and anxiety, and especially suicidality. So they're there for that. We now have this great technology that can support people through that. So a lot of the pressure gets taken off of you guys as leaders, I hope, with these hotlines and that kind of support.
well, that's good to know about. Um, so could we talk about when we ourselves are the ones struggling with mental and emotional health? This could be ongoing things we've been dealing with for a while, or maybe it's a result of the pandemic, just there are a lot of people under a great deal of stress right now. It's been we have I think just a lot of accumulated trauma from the year that we've had. And so how do we, I think a really important question for spiritual leaders is, how do we lean into our personal faith, but also our ministry and serving others when we feel really tired out, and sometimes we feel like we don't have anything to give, and here we are in the position of trying to care for other people. What would you suggest?
Oh, I love that question, because so often the people who help others forget to help and care for themselves. And you cannot help other people if you're empty. I mean, I know we hear that again and again and again, but it's something I've had to repeat to myself, I know, multiple times within a week lately, just between the busyness of the season, the extent that, COVID, it keeps changing what life looks like. I think that's such an important thing to reflect on and be like, okay, am I taking time for myself? Period. Is there any time that I'm spending doing something that I love or something that brings me life, not just something for other people, which it can be both. But I think just taking that time, for me, sometimes it's prayer, sometimes it's a daily devotional, sometimes it's just peacefully sitting and finding quiet, even if it's 5 minutes locked in the bathroom. It looks different now, right? So we need to be flexible with that. I think the other thing too is just remembering to take breaks, to maybe, oh gosh, what did someone say to me the other day, where they're just like, go enjoy your family. And I was like, you're right. I need to just be really intentional about going and enjoying my family right now, because I'm not intentional about that right now. I'm too busy trying to just, make sure there's dinner on the table because the line for the grocery store was so long. And just spending even like 10 or 15 minutes playing, with my husband and kids, it's like, can be totally life-changing for the rest of that day. In addition to, we also need to be getting outside, moving, maybe not even together, just really taking that time, maybe doing some yoga, and again, it doesn't have to be like the 30-minute class or the hour-long class that we used to do, 10 or 15 minutes. So like, I know I'll take like my daughter and I'll just be like, I'm just going to go on a walk. I've only got 10 minutes between these things, but we're strapping on the baby carrier and we're just going to go. And it can be so life-giving. So whatever that is, I just encourage you to figure that out and just do even little bits of it. So don't put the expectation on yourself of it's going to look like what it used to look like to care for myself. Just do it in little, quick, easy ways that are not going to be draining. So that's the important part. If you're doing something and you think it's life-giving, but you end up more stressed or more tired or scatterbrained at the end of it, then that might not be the thing that works anymore. So just being gentle with yourself and really just trying to find what works now and alter your expectations for yourself so that it's manageable, because our expectations we used to have don't fit in today's world like
Sure.
they did a year ago.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. And I would add too that in terms of group leadership, if there's something you need to rethink in terms of how you do your group going forward for the spring session, just encourage you to be really creative as to if there's anything you need to tweak in order to make it more manageable. Depending on your level of stress and burnout, there's been a lot of really great creativity this fall from home group leaders making spiritual connection work, even if they have to modify it, shorten it, make it every other week, just have other people lead, rotate leadership, simplify your expectations, discuss 3 questions instead of 8 questions, whatever whatever it needs to be. There are ways to modify what we do that will make it more manageable for the stresses of this time.
Absolutely. And one more thing that I thought of is ask for help. I
Yeah.
say that with humility as someone who really struggles with asking for help, because I'm so used to being able to just do it all. And it's, they say ask a busy person if you want to get something done. Well, that looks so different now because my bandwidth is so much more full. And I know for me, if I just ask for like a little bit of help, what a difference that can make to my stress level and my ability to do things well. So just, if it, like you said, as you're trying to come up with new ways to do group, guys, talk to Erin. I'd be like, hey, this is the situation we're running into and I don't know what to do. Like, just shoot her a quick text or an email and be like, hey, we're running into this snag. Bring other people in to help problem solve with you and don't feel like you have to do it alone.
Amen. Well, do you have any final words for us, just from your own experience and what you hear from people? Like, what do you want to say to believers in the city of Santa Barbara in this time and this space? And anything you want to leave us with?
Well, I think the thing that I keep telling myself and my clients and my friends and my family
Mhm.
is be gentle with yourself. Just really allow yourself some flexibility because everything is in flux right now, right? Week to week, day to day, things can dramatically shift and alter. So just like you would have patience and grace for other people, extend that to yourself.
Mhm.
So not just for other people, but really just allow yourself to pause, regroup, take extra time if you need things. And if you notice signs or symptoms of depression or anxiety in yourself, I just really encourage you to reach out to either be a friend or a church leader, or if it starts feeling like enough that you can't just talk to someone about it and have it be okay. Like if you have a good chat with a friend and it doesn't feel like it's getting alleviated, that's the time to really reach out for professional help. And there's so much benefit that can come from really just being honest with yourself about this is becoming more than the normal stress, anxiety, sadness that I've felt in the past. This is different because it's a different world. And so we might need to respond differently. So
Yeah,
pause, reflect, evaluate what you need. And then I just encourage you to go after and get that support that you might need.
that's a great word. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you offering to give us some help here in this area. And thank you so much for the good work that you're doing. It's
My
so
pleasure.
very needed. All right. God bless you, Becca.
Thank you.